Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and today we're here to talk about the major update that just released for Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy for the Nintendo Switch. To be clear, this is not a re-review of the trilogy. I've already reviewed it twice, once on the 3DS and once on the Switch. And if you don't feel like watching those original reviews, I especially don't blame if you don't watch the 3DS one. Basically, I said that the Switch version brought over the new art assets for the characters, which made them look a bit nicer, and it added a few UI changes, such as text box transparency and rumble, but otherwise, besides a check mark that appeared on your cursor when you investigated an area, were more or less the same games. And so your enjoyment of this trilogy would largely depend on how well you can put up with the original game's problems. With this major update, there have been a lot of quality of life enhancements and new content that's been added to this trilogy to make it more in line with other Ace Attorney collections that have since come out. And so my goal for this video is not to re-examine the original games and their writing and structure, but more so to look at the changes in the update. And therefore, if you were turned off of the Ace Attorney trilogy based on my complaints in either of those previous reviews, do I take back those complaints now that this update exists? So first and foremost, the update itself is free. So if you already have the game, then all you gotta do is have an internet connection, and there you go. Now what you get with the upgrade is quite a lot, so bear with me. There are now multiple languages supported, and that goes for voice acting too. So I would imagine that they actually got new voice actors to record for these original games for the first time in probably over 20 years. Even though I personally only like to play my games in English, I think that's cool that they're accommodating more people. There's a chapter select feature where instead of having to play through the entire game over and over again or save spamming on multiple save files, you can now just pick whichever part of the game you want. Now, since I already beat all 3 games on this trilogy, I don't know if this applies if you just boot up the game, but it is nice that if there's a specific part of the case that you just really love, like that finale in Justice for All, and don't want to sit through all the boring investigations, then you can just jump straight to your favorite parts, which again, the more mainline Ace Attorney collections have done that, and it is a very welcome change, especially in Rise from the Ashes, because there were some really annoying bits in that game. But if you're the type that doesn't like to jump around, and you do want to experience the entire game, but you need just a little bit more help, they got you covered too. The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles introduced the option of a story mode, which allowed for the game to essentially play itself. But what was cool about it was that you could turn it on and off as much as you want, and you could even adjust how quick the text scrolled. So, to give a hypothetical example, let's say you were in a cross-examination, and you couldn't figure out which statement had the contradiction. You could set the story mode to slow, so that the game would slowly advance along to the contradictory statement, and then it would open the court record for you, and then you would turn off the story mode and select the evidence. So essentially, it prevents you from ever having to look up a walkthrough, which is so good for Rise from the Ashes, because that game dealt with the DS's extra features since it was not included in the original Game Boy Advance release of Ace Attorney, and there were some scenes that involved pointing out specific parts in a full motion video, and another really annoying puzzle that involved rotating a jar to exactly the right angle, and it had to be pixel perfect. Now, if those parts frustrate you, you can just use the story mode, which is a game changer. If you did not like the Ace Attorney games before, this change alone would be enough for me to say, no, I 100% recommend it. Because now, if there's anything you don't like about the game, just let the game play itself. And then that'll save you the time and the energy of doing a walkthrough, and then you can fast forward the dialogue as much as you want, and we haven't even gotten to the slew of just flat out cool extras that they added just because they could. There's now a gallery mode where you can look at illustrations and music from throughout the series. What I really like about the music player is that, just like in the other Ace Attorney collections, they added songs from other existing Ace Attorney albums that you can listen to. Specifically, one called Turnabout Tunes, which in Japanese I believe is Ace Attorney in Jazz Soul is what it's called. And basically it's jazzy renditions of some popular tunes. And the other one is a piano album. Both of these were originally released in Japan, and I don't know if they're available on YouTube. So this is a nice, valuable way to sort of preserve these albums. There's a bit of a catch, but we'll get to that. Either way, I love listening to these pieces. The music was consistent, and I've really gotten into piano and jazz a lot ever since playing games like Super Mario Galaxy, Fire Emblem Awakening, and Mario Kart 8. So it was nice to hear all these familiar tunes in this new musical setting. Now, I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't have any orchestra pieces like the other Ace Attorney collections did, but I feel like this can be sort of justified by two ways. One, the update is free, so the fact that we're getting this much is incredible. But two, it helps make this particular trilogy distinct, because all of the Ace Attorney collections have had different selections of bonus music. So this allows this one to stand on its own because none of the other collections have these particular music albums. And it's nice to be able to have some exclusive content on the older Ace Attorney trilogy. There's also a Turnabout Creator mode where you can create your own Ace Attorney scenarios. You can even set up a green screen or a blue screen if you want to do like fancy schmancy editing. Again, this was a thing that was in the Apollo Justice trilogy, and I think it was also in the Ace Attorney Investigations collection, and it's great to see this brought over. From what I could tell just by futzing around with it a little bit, it's a little bit more limited, but nonetheless a very welcome inclusion. One strange thing that I noticed that is a carryover from the Apollo Justice trilogy is that the games uniformly have now changed the voice acting for Phoenix in particular, so that he uses the voice lines from Sam Riegel in the 3DS Ace Attorney games, which on its own isn't too big of a deal, but in Apollo Justice it was particularly off-putting because Phoenix's voice became consistent across all three games, but Apollo had a different voice actor in the 3DS game than he did in his DS debut, but they continued using the original DS actor's voice clips in that, and then Orion Akaba, whatever his name is, in the newer games. So it's like, why did you go out of your way to get rid of Ben Judd's original performance, but not the original Apollo actor? And in this case, they didn't bother replacing any of Edgeworth's lines with Kyle Hebert's performance, so what do they have against Ben Judd? Is he like some kind of criminal or something? Please let me know in the comments section, because I am genuinely curious why they keep making this change. I have nothing against Sam Riegel. I think he did a phenomenal job doing all the shouts and objections in a new form. Personally, I'm a bit biased towards Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright. That's my personal favorite Ace Attorney game. And I kind of wish they would have gotten Trevor White's lines, or at least like given you the option to hear his, because I think Sam did better in the cutscenes, but Trevor White did better with the actual like shouting objection and hold it. Like his voice is the voice that I think of when I think of Phoenix Wright nowadays in the actual courtroom. But it's a small little nitpick. I just think that fans who are purists of the original games unfortunately have no choice but to hear the new acting. If they don't like it, they're just going to either be forced to stick with it or turn it off. As far as I'm aware, those are all the major changes made to the game after the update. Again, let me remind you that the update is completely free, so if you already have it, you don't have to pay anything extra. Now let's get into the catch that I mentioned earlier about preservation. This game costs $30, but it's digital only. There is still no physical release, which is weird because the Apollo Justice Trilogy, the Ace Attorney Investigations Collection, and the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles all had physical releases. So why is this one the odd exception? In a way, it doesn't allow for full preservation of the title because it's digital only. The 3DS games had that same problem on the 3DS eShop, but at least they're now preserved in the Apollo Justice Ace Attorney trilogy because that game had a physical version. So if you really want to hear those piano and jazz renditions of the songs, At this point, you kind of have to hope that either someone already put them on YouTube or you just download it while you can. Now, if you haven't already bought Ace Attorney Trilogy, I do think $30 is quite a good price, because it basically means you're getting 3 DS games for the price of 1, along with so much extra content, and the story mode basically eliminating every single problem I've really ever had with the game. The only minor nitpicks I can think of that are left over are that the text box still hasn't been properly programmed to support widescreen. Like, the text box will stretch across the whole screen, but the actual text itself won't scroll along with it. It'll still pretend like it's the original DS aspect ratio, which is very odd considering that Ace Attorney Investigations collection fixed that, so somehow that couldn't carry over. And it is a bit unfortunate that you can't switch between Ben Judd and Sam Riegel for the sake of the purists, but otherwise, as someone who's a diehard Ace Attorney fan and who now owns every single game in the series, I think it's great that new life is being given to this older trilogy, and now people don't have to say, oh, that's the odd one because those are the older games. Now, pretty much every collection has its own merits. And now, everyone who's ever made a Let's Rank every Ace Attorney collection will have to redo their ranking, because this changes everything. And the fact that it's free is so mind-blowing, because if this were Nintendo, this would have been a Switch 2 edition. But no, it's still there on the Switch 1 for free. And I just think it's an absolute steal. Normally, I would say wait for it to be rentable, but I would say if you're okay with digital purchases, $30 is great, and if you get it on sale, even better. I'm never gonna say don't wait for a sale. Like, if you can get a game on sale, go for it. So with that, my original verdict has completely changed. That was completely unintentional. I did not mean to make a courtroom joke. The only reason I could think of why you wouldn't want to buy this is if you didn't like Ace Attorney, because the original 3 games still stand up absolutely spectacular. Sure, there are some cases that are better than others. Sure, there are typos here and there, but for the most part, the story that they tell when you play all 3 of them back to back is magnificent. These have some of the best characters in the franchise, and the sound effects and the music, they may be based on the Game Boy Advance sound font, but they're still catchy as heck, and if you don't like them, they're arrangements that the new update brought along. So, I hope that if you watched my original review and said, that's not for me because those Cyclops investigations are so annoying, now you can just skip them with story mode. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if I missed anything, because I would hate to not have you guys be informed, and I'd also be curious what your history with Ace Attorney is. And if you really want Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright to be on the Switch, it's the only one we're missing. Please make it happen, Level 5 and Capcom. Alright, I'm gonna call it here, so until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!